Welcome to the Intake Podcast. We are your hosts, Carson Miller and Travelle McManus, and this is the podcast where we dive into the media shaping our world today.
So for this episode, we're going to do a mid-season deep dive at the halfway point of Daredevil Born Again. But first, we gotta talk about this. We got hit with a bombshell yesterday, where we got the casting list, a casting video of the Avengers Doomsday cast, and
Yeah,
it was a lot.
it was a lot. And through some internet searching, this was actually initially a live stream, a 5.5 hour live stream, where every 12 minutes they put out one casting chair.
Oh goodness, I did not know
And
that.
yeah, we were lucky enough to catch this later in the day when they released a 2.5 minute video with all of the chairs in a row, and you got to see all of the names of the cast members for Avengers Doomsday. So this kind of lets us know who our heroes and even some villains are going to be in this upcoming movie. So this is only 3 movies away. That's the crazy part, is that we have
It is
Thunderbolts in
crazy.
May, Fantastic Four in July, and then the next year, 2026, we have Avengers Doomsday. That's our next 3 MCU movies. But let's dive into this list. I'm just going to go through and read them off. We've grouped them kind of in their traditional groupings of different heroes. And so we will start with Thor, Loki, Captain America, Anthony Mackie's Captain America, the Winter Soldier, our new Falcon, Danny Ramirez. We have Black Panther. This is Letitia Wright from Wakanda Forever. She's taken up the mantle of Black Panther. M'Baku, Namor, Ant-Man, Shang-Chi, Professor X. Patrick Stewart is back as Professor X. Ian McKellen is back as Magneto. We have Beast, Kelsey Grammer, Nightcrawler, Alan Cumming, Mystique. I don't know how to say her name, but it's not the Jennifer Lawrence version.
Okay.
We have Cyclops, Gambit. Channing Tatum is coming officially into the full-fledged
he
MCU as
made
Gambit.
he made a name for himself.
He did. U.S. Agent, which is kind of what has been termed the Walmart Captain America from the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show, and then
Very much
Thunderbolts.
so.
A new character to us right now, but we will get to know him in Thunderbolts. Sentry, Red Guardian, Ghost, Yelena, Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, Human Torch, The Thing, and then Doctor Doom, played by Robert Downey Jr. So that
So
is
interesting.
a long list of characters.
That
What
is
was
a
your
long
initial
list.
reaction to this list, Travell?
Well, the first thing that's definitely, I feel like, grabbed my attention and a lot of people's attention was the X-Men cast.
Yeah.
Because there's been a whole bunch of buzz around X-Men, a whole bunch of buzz on, are they going to recast X-Men? Are they going to start fresh? Are they going to go into the mutant saga? Like, how is all of this going to work? So to see a huge chunk of this cast
Hmm.
being the original X-Men, and for me being kind of fresh on the X-Men movies because I just watched them all the way through before Deadpool. Deadpool back last year. So
Mm.
I'm really excited about that. I guess out of that list, like Magneto has been
Right.
a character that I have really gotten close with throughout these
Hmm.
X-Men series, watching also the X-Men cartoon, X-Men 97, which I still think to this day is the best thing that Disney Plus has done with Marvel. And
Wow.
so just Magneto and his character, I'm really excited to see that played out on stage.
Mm.
There was some Gambit. That was, I was
Yeah.
just happy. I loved his character in Deadpool. Everyone wanted more of that, and we thought that this was going to just be a gimmick and this was a one-time
Mhm.
thing. So that really makes me happy to see that they're sticking with it and they're going to keep playing into that. And then Namor, just because I truthfully forgot about. I
Right.
don't watch Black Panther 2 just because it's
Mm.
depressing, and it makes me
Yeah.
really sad because it's not the story that we thought we were going to get when we saw Black
Right.
Panther 1. So I just completely forgot about where, the Black Panther saga end, where they're at, and the relationship between Black Panther and Namor. So seeing him, I was like, okay, it's good to see him because I also think that he's probably one of the better villains of
Yeah.
post
Hmm.
Infinity Saga. So I'm really happy to see him back and to see what role he plays. So those were
Yep.
like the X-Men, I guess, as a whole, Gambit and Namor. That was kind of the three that was like, okay, I'm I'm on board. Not that I
Yeah.
wasn't going to be before, but now it's like, okay, I have something to be excited about. How did you feel?
Right. I was definitely, I mean, I was very, very surprised. First of all,
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting this video to come out. When I saw it pop up on YouTube yesterday, I watched it and then immediately texted you, like, hey, we got to talk about this. And the main reason was I was not expecting almost any X-Men to be in this movie,
Yeah.
let alone the the oldest version of the cast. I was not
hmm
expecting to see Patrick Stewart's name pop up. I love Patrick Stewart, huge Patrick
Oh
Stewart
yeah.
fan, love Professor X, but was not anticipating that at all. And then it just kept going. Like if we had just gotten Professor X and Magneto, like that would have still fit in somewhat to my expectations. But to add Cyclops, to add Mystique, to add Gambit, it's a lot to take in. It totally changes the way and where I think this story is going to go.
Yes.
Because and maybe I was more surprised by some of the people that weren't on the list, which I know that we're going to talk
hmm
about here. But I also think that this may also allow them to kill off some characters. Not that I want to see
Yes.
them die, not that I want our heroes to go away, but this, I don't know, the X-Men, I'm excited, and then there's also the part of me is like, man, I feel like we've said goodbye to these characters 3 or 4 times now.
Well, now this might
um,
be the actual final.
this might be the actual final goodbye, because every time we've talked about the X-Men coming into the MCU and having the mutant saga kind of follow up this multiverse mess that we've been in,
hmm
is I've been excited to see a new cast take on these
Yes.
roles. And so
Yes.
to have the old cast come back is like, okay, I got to kind of wrap my head around this. And we've seen bits and pieces. Beast pops up at the end of the Marvels in a post-credit scene. So that's not a huge surprise, but to see everybody else was. Everybody else kind of makes
hmm
sense. I am more surprised by the people who are left off this list.
Yes. And
Um,
so,
yeah, so why don't you go through? We created a list of our own that was people we were surprised to see left off. So why don't you take the first
yeah.
half?
Yeah, so we got, just like the core squad that we are familiar with from the Infinity Saga. So, you got Hulk,
Mm,
Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, Star-Lord, because we knew at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy he was going to
right,
return, Vision, Warhammer, Nick Fury, and then we have the Young Avengers as well, if you want to take
right.
that squad.
Yeah, so we have the two things that I was a little bit surprised about. If we're going to go to X-Men and we're going to have some Disney Plus characters coming into the movies, which I'm 100% for, it's surprising that we don't get the new version of the Guardians of the Galaxy team.
Oh yeah, yep.
To me, it's surprising that we don't get some of the Young Avengers, or what we're loosely
Any of
terming
them.
as the Young Avengers. They haven't officially come together as a group yet. But
Yeah.
Miss Marvel, Kate Bishop, who's taking on the Hawkeye mantle, Wiccan and Speed, which is Billy Maximoff and Tommy Maximoff from WandaVision, and then Agatha All Along, Cassie Lang, Ant-Man's daughter, who suits up in Quantum Mania, America Chavez, who is a pretty prominent character in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. She's the kind of, I guess, maybe the MacGuffin there, what allows him to teleport between
hmm
worlds. Hulk's son, Hulkling, and then Ironheart as well. So there's a long list of characters that are surprising, and probably the one that surprises me the most is Spider-Man. I
Yeah.
100% thought Spider-Man was going to be in this.
Well, so the question, what do you think that this is the final? Because I just don't feel like this is the final list. I think they're still
Mm,
holding, with it being so far out. I think they're still holding some cards
right.
close to the chest, because I do think I saw, and it could be,
Mm,
I I'm pretty, because Robert Downey Jr. is playing a huge role in the marketing of this. He was the only
yeah.
chair that we saw where he was actually
Mm-hmm.
seated, and there was a comment at the bottom. He did comment on that video
Okay.
saying, "Is this it?" And the Marvel account said there's more to come. And
Okay.
because I mean, I just can't. So like some of these I can get, the Young Avengers,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're waiting for them for another time. Nick
Right.
Fury, that might be a thing of the past, but Spider-Man and Doctor
Mm,
Strange, because
yeah.
it seemed that they were positioning, this new Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Black Panther front
Right.
as like the new Captain
Mm,
America, the new
right.
face of the Avengers. So to not have, you know, Spider-Man
Mm,
and Doctor Strange, it feels, I just feel like it's too not too good. It's too. I just can't see it.
Yeah,
I'll be
I think
surprised if they are not there.
I think we may get an Avengers Endgame style
Mm-hmm.
version of them popping up, where you have the portal scene at the end where everybody comes through, and we might get that where whatever happens in Doomsday leads us to this point that then we get the whole cast of characters coming together for what will follow up, which will be Avengers Secret Wars in 2027. So I
Yeah.
think we might catch them at the end for like 5 to 10 minutes, maybe that sets
Mm-hmm.
up the next movie. But I think it'd be a disservice to the fans, to us, if you line up these 24 chairs and say this is the main cast list, but then Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen are the ones who are only in it for 5 minutes. That
Yeah.
would be very misleading. I'd be pretty upset, to be honest,
Yes.
if we get Spider Man's in 40 minutes of the movie and we only get Nightcrawler for two. That
Yes.
you're telling me that this is the main cast. Everybody else may be on the periphery, and I'm okay with that. There may be more to come,
I
but
like that. I like that theory because I didn't think about
yeah,
it like that. Like I didn't think about this being the main cast. I mean, and yes, they have like if you're gonna have this many X-Men, they can't be up there for five
mm,
minutes. Like they
right.
have to be a vital part of the story, and that
Hmm.
makes it such an interesting. Because I just yeah, like what's that gonna
Right.
look like?
I have no idea. And I think some of, maybe even more surprising, is Captain Marvel, because at the end of the Marvels, you get
Mm,
Beast meeting with Photon, who has connections to Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel and Wanda, and she's a very interconnected character. Whether you
yes.
think she's the best hero or you like her as a character or not,
Mm-hmm.
she's vital in a lot of different relationships.
Yeah.
To have Beast there, to not have her listed, to not have Captain Marvel or Miss Marvel listed, those are surprising. So it's just a very interesting list, and I really don't know if our next two movies, because they are so team focused already, how much
Mm-hmm.
interconnected nature they're going to have to the rest of the MCU, and then
Yeah.
how do we get to the start point of Doomsday.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I also and another big one that I completely just thought of now is are we getting Wolverine? Like, are we getting
right.
how are we gonna leave him out of this, especially after Wolverine Deadpool? Like, are we getting a new Wolverine? Is
Yep.
he coming? Like, that's gonna be Hugh Jackman. I was like, blank on his name. Hugh Jackman. Like, is
Yeah.
he gonna drop out of nowhere? So that's yeah, it's gonna be
It's
really
interesting.
interesting. It changes how I'm thinking about this movie because I
Mm,
just was going in one direction and they really just threw me a curveball. So, and it
right.
is interesting just seeing, we got the Fantastic Four, we
Yep.
got the Thunderbolt crew. So like what is these next two movies that we're getting?
Right.
And that makes me a little not concerned, but it I would be surprised if we don't get context of what Doomsday is going to look like from these
Hmm.
two movies, given that these characters are listed.
Right.
But then again, Winter Soldier, you have those characters, and that gave us nothing.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
We'll
It
see.
could be either or. But
Yeah.
I feel like Elite. I mean, Fantastic Four almost has to because of
Yeah.
Doctor Doom. So I get that, but Thunderbolts could be interesting. Could be really
Yeah.
interesting.
It could be. But you know who else is not on this list? Daredevil. So it doesn't look like Daredevil's going to make an appearance here. They've been saying he's a street level character, and so far, we are now 7 episodes, 6 episodes in
6 episodes
to
in, yeah.
Daredevil Born Again, and we have 4 episodes to cover since the last time that we talked about it.
Yeah.
And I watched 3 episodes last night to catch up.
Oh, okay. I
Uh,
watched two. I watched the last two. Yeah.
So, why don't you just kind of kick us off and maybe with just kind of let us know where we're picking up the story?
You pick up at the trial of Hector Ayala, aka White Tiger, to ask some heavy questions about heroism, justice, and the cost of standing up for people. And in a chaotic courtroom full with police seeking for justice for the cop that Hector killed, Matt reveals that Hector's identity is the White Tiger. This leads
Mm,
to a change in the conversation around the roles of vigilantes. And after hearing multiple statements of those whose lives were saved by Hector,
mm,
or shall I say White Tiger, A jury found his acts of saving the guy that the police attacking a noble one and one that was found not guilty. But the whole thing takes a gut punch turn when Hector, as a free man, was executed shortly after on the streets by someone wearing a symbol that we're pretty familiar with if you watch the Netflix series. It's
Mm.
the symbol of Punisher. So yeah, court scene, Law and
Yeah.
Order, Hell Kitchen. Like, what did you think of this episode?
So at this point, we are really diving into this kind of courtroom drama part of Daredevil. And I
Yes.
actually really enjoy this. I love the action, I love the fighting, but I love that we're spending time and having these characters develop and to see Matt be a lawyer. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest things that I didn't like about She Hulk was we didn't actually see her be a lawyer all that much. And
That's a good point. I
um,
can agree with that.
having not seen the Netflix show, I don't know how much lawyering goes on in that show or not, but I enjoy that we're getting to see the MCU through this different perspective and that we get to ask some interesting legal questions about, okay, how do we, what is a jury's viewpoint on a person with the information that they have? How does that testimony change? How does their verdict change because of that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not the best legal drama. If we really want to dive into it, we have a couple lawyer friends we can invite on the show to tell us
Yes.
how unlawyery this show is. But I've been enjoying that part about it. I think one of the big questions is how vigilantes are taking on the mantle and responsibility of their communities. And how does that impact society? And how does that impact the law? I think those are some interesting questions that the show is trying to juggle and make us think about because we're so used to the superheroes that fly, the aliens that come from outer space, and we see all the action, then we disappear. We don't see the rest of the story where people have lost their homes. We don't see the story about communities that have been impacted by this. All we see is the fun action.
Yes.
Um, and so I think the show is really bringing us down to earth and trying to dig into some of those details of the universe.
Hmm. Yeah, and going to your question of the Netflix, I think this was definitely probably the more intimate court case scenes that we've seen with Matt Murdock because of how invested he was in that conversation. Because obviously it hits close to home for him being a vigilante himself and trying to also find that question of is this necessary? Like, do we need
Mm,
this? Like, can I just work in the system, or do we need to have people out on the streets protecting others? And we felt like we got that answer. We felt like this not guilty verdict was the answer to the problem, but
mm,
shortly after we realized that was not the case. And I and this is a running theme that kind of going into just the overall where we're at with the show. The only issue that I have right now is that there's a lot of telling and not a lot of
mm,
showing.
mm,
And as much as I was invested in this court case and invested in, the outcome of it, I wish we got to see more of White Tiger
mm.
in action. Seeing him actually saving the people that was speaking on his behalf more so than just getting you know, these stories and trying to build this relationship with this character where we could have kind of seen that. Because as soon as
Right,
we see him in action, he's killed off.
right.
So it's just kind of a missed opportunity for us to have some connection to this character opposed to just this court case and the
Mm,
outcome of that and just how quickly, there was retaliation to his non-guilty verdict. By who?
right.
We don't know,
We
but
don't know.
you know, someone was bothered, whether it was the cops, whether it was Fisk. There's definitely some tension brewing between law enforcement and
Mm,
people who are taking the law into their own hands.
right. No, that's for sure. And I think that White Tiger may have been wasted a little bit as a character, but it doesn't bother me fully. I have no prior knowledge of who White Tiger is, what he
Yeah,
does, what powers his amulet gives him. So some of that backstory may have been helpful, but it also may have taken away from some of Matt's story because the focus really is on Matt and Daredevil himself. And I think White Tiger does serve as a plot device to get Matt closer to being back in the suit. and they had Foggy's death at the beginning of episode 1 that allows us that transition from Netflix to the Disney Plus series and takes Matt out of the suit, and we pick up with him a fairly long time later,
Yeah.
and he needs something to engage him back into his Daredevil self, and Hector, White Tiger, is that thing. So maybe we could have had a little bit more at the beginning of about White Tiger, even if it's just a couple scenes with him doing something, or maybe even his who we meet in a couple episodes later, his niece, telling her friends about the White Tiger, and we get like a little bit of storytelling aspect
Hmm.
of it, or maybe the BB reports, this low level reporter that is like essentially shooting YouTube videos and stuff. If she had some footage of him fighting crime, that may have been something good to have in there. But overall, I wasn't terribly upset about his usage here in the show because I think it serves Matt's story better.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think there definitely is a theme here, and that focus is very much on two characters, and that's
Mm.
Matt Murdock and that's Wilson Fisk. And
Yep.
we didn't get a lot of him in this episode, but we
Mm.
did get to see more around his relationship with Vanessa, what
Right.
that looks like. We had another counseling session. There's definitely some tension there with
Mm-hmm.
Vanessa running the new Kingpin, and that whole dynamic. And just I know you said that was something that you were excited to see after
Yeah.
watching the first two episodes. How are you feeling seeing that kind of evolve, and Adam and
Right.
that whole dynamic of with there being a third player in the marriage that is not approved by both
Right.
parties?
Right. And that's jumping ahead a little bit, but I do still like the marriage counseling aspect. I think that this show so far, for all of its weaknesses that it has, and it does have some weaknesses, its strengths are as it's humanizing these characters. That we aren't just seeing them as caricatures of themselves. We aren't seeing just their hero or villain versions. We are seeing multiple sides to their characters, and we're seeing a more vulnerable Kingpin in a marriage counseling session with his wife, and we're seeing a different side of her inside the marriage counseling sessions. We're seeing a different side to Matt's new girlfriend. So we kind of get these different perspectives just through these brief little scenes. I mean, they're not a huge part of the story. This isn't a marriage story or anything from a couple years ago, but this is a key point that is humanizing who Wilson Fisk is and some of the changes that he has made or hasn't,
Things they made,
depending
yeah.
on what we're talking about. But I still really enjoy that part, and I enjoy seeing their relationship because I have no prior knowledge from the Netflix series. I
Hmm.
don't know about their relationship at all. So seeing their relationship in this way, I think, is beneficial to the audience.
Yeah. And before we jump into the next episode, this was, like I was wondering with um Bullseye being in jail,
Mm,
like who was going to be the villain in this? Because
right.
I really don't feel like it is Wilson Fisk. Like as much
Mm,
as I I I know from watching the Netflix series what he's capable of, what he's
right.
done, the horrible things he's done. It does seem like this is a parallel story of Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk. So if Wilson Fisk is the villain, so is Matt Murdock, and obviously that's
Mm,
not the story they're trying to tell. So we then, at the end of this episode, get a very brief and very disturbing
mm-hmm.
introduction to our villain of this series, Muse,
Yep.
who is a graffiti artist, but he uses his victim's blood to make the graffiti. So this is
Mm-hmm.
someone who is on a murdering spree, just
Right.
literally collecting people's blood and using that to create art. Really
Mm.
disturbing. That's all we got. He has this horrible mask that just like haunted me that night I watched it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, just a very like for the MCU, like I definitely think a more like horror movie
Mm-hmm.
ish like villain.
Right. Yeah. I don't like this guy. We've talked about we don't do horror on this podcast. I mean, we may do one horror as like a one-time special, maybe around Halloween or something. But this is creepy, and it's like Silence of the Lambs level creepy
Hmm.
and gross, and I don't
Yes.
like it. But it also will be a unifying figure for Kingpin and Daredevil to kind of go after. Two different ways that they're going to go after him, it seems like, but they both want to take this guy out. Is kind
Yes.
of where we get kind of towards the end of episode 6, um, which we'll get to here in just a few minutes.
Yeah,
But
but
we did get our first introduction to him. We see a brief scene of him at the end of episode 3, and I didn't like it, and it did creep me out. I didn't sleep
yep.
very good last night, I'll be honest.
Yep. And so, but we kind of keep to the same cycle of, the system, questions around the systems, the need of vigilantes into
Mm,
episode 4,
yep.
where, Matt is still trying to commit to just being a lawyer and just carrying out justice the best way that
Mm,
he sees fit. And,
yep.
we learn more about Hector's murder, a bullet,
Mm,
some just kind of gathering facts. And then we get some more court actions with
mm,
Matt, just working with a plea deal for a guy who was stealing camel corn,
mm,
for what that's worth. But the heart of this episode was very much the interaction between Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, and Matt
mm.
Murdock. And we get a
Yeah.
really deep conversation between him and Matt about revenge, anger, and just the overall system. And
Right.
I loved every second
Okay.
of it. Their chemistry from the Netflix series definitely bleed over into this episode. I love when he calls him Red. I love how he
Mm,
kind of picks holes at his logic of justice
mm,
and, you know, kind of helping him understand that we are more alike. You come to me looking at me like I'm the monster and I'm
mm.
doing things wrong, but we're more alike than you ever thought. We
Right.
both know that the system is broken. We both have lost loved ones to people who don't care and are not actively doing what's need to be done to bring
Mm.
justice. And you could see that with Matt, and it was good. I loved it. I don't how did you feel about that part of the episode?
About Punisher, it was fine. I don't. Again, I have
So
no
funny.
prior. I have no prior information to draw on. I enjoyed that he called him Red. I thought that was a funny quirk that he had. And John Bernthal did a great job
Yeah.
portraying somebody who is haunted by his past and
Yes.
chooses to take that out in um, some extremely violent ways to bring justice to the world, his justice to the world, and I found it interesting. I also felt a little bit lost, just to be honest. Like I don't know their relationship.
Mm,
And so I was expecting maybe a little bit more of a bridge into this for those
hmm
that aren't caught up on the Netflix side of things. And I just didn't feel like they landed that very well. I thought it was a good scene. I thought that it was very well acted, very well written, but it didn't hold that emotional weight for me personally.
hmm
I actually did find value in the caramel corn guy that Matt spends time with. And I think because Punisher and Daredevil are talking about how the system is broken, how it doesn't always work right. And oftentimes this is when a superpowered individual or just a vigilante who's gone on to the wrong side of the fence and has chosen, or hold on, or a criminal has taken out somebody that they've loved for whatever reason. But I also think that looking at the system from the actual like justice side, where we have somebody who's arrested for stealing kettle corn or caramel corn or whatever it is,
hmm
and then Matt is trying to work as a lawyer to he takes on this guy's case. I think it was pro bono, and is trying to work with this guy on lessening his sentence. What's I'm surprised that you didn't find value in the caramel corn guy. Actually,
It was the execution of it. So the message behind it, I
yeah.
do like. The
Okay.
execution of it personally felt very corny. It just felt very
Okay.
corny. I didn't like how aggressive I get the message, I get him being frustrated with the system, but
Right.
the fact that it was over camel corn or caramel corn,
Right.
whatever, can't even pronounce it. I just thought that, and that is something that, and I think, that there is some execution issues with the show at times, and then there is the disconnect. And you and I are kind of showing that of the
Right.
people who saw the Netflix series and can relate to these certain moments and didn't see the Netflix series and kind of having to put the pieces together. But
Right.
for this specific scene, it was just a for me it was just a combination of just like bad writing, just like
Mm.
a weird story to try to use as the vehicle for the message that they want to send out. Like we could have had a better story. We could have used
Right.
more real experiences, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from people who've had family members who have had issues in the justice system, like,
Right.
it's not because of stuff like that. I mean, the thought of it is there, yes, and I
Right.
do think, though, there was one line that he did say that I was like, okay, I get what you're trying to say here, and for that I would give it grace. So I think it's corny, but I'll give it grace when he said, y'all charge more y'all pay 10 times as much
Mm.
to charge me for a crime instead of just using some of that money to feed me. So that right
Mm.
there was like, okay, I get what what the show is trying to communicate to me, and that is a important message. Next time,
Right.
let's just execute on that a little bit
Yeah.
better. So that was like my takeaway of it. But
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I agree. It wasn't the best written, and at times it felt a little cheesy. I thought that the message of that the system doesn't set people up for success. It
Mm-hmm.
is there to um, serve justice, to execute a punishment, and to move on. There's not a, hey, I missed a certain appointment and then I lost access to food stamps in this case, but it could be healthcare. It could be a lot of different things that then set you on a cycle that ends you right back up in the same place you started. And that the system is not set up for success in that way. It is purely set up for the execution of justice. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that message was impactful for me of, yeah, I don't think about that all that often. It
Mm-hmm.
really, like, that's not something that crosses my mind a whole lot. And maybe it should more. That there, how can we better impact our communities that have this struggle with the justice system? So I agree, not the best executed,
Mm-hmm.
not the best written. Although I thought that Matt's response of, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think that's how a lot of us feel is, yeah, I don't know how to change that in
Mm-hmm.
our own lives. And I
Yeah.
think it starts by just caring about our neighbors and caring about our community and showing up in those places to be able to affect change how we can, because changing the entire U.S. justice system is not within most of our grasps. Um, so,
And and then you see that there's two sides to this too, because not only do you get Matt's side of this episode and his conflict with the system and
mm,
how it operates, but you also get Wilson Fisk's side. And I actually found this side of it a lot more appealing, like a lot more appealing and
yeah,
interesting, because you're seeing his frustration with the limitations, or I guess the guardrails that he can have as a mayor to actually make meaningful change in the community as well. The procedures, the pumpkin stance of, like, having to go to all of these different events. And it's
mm,
funny watching, this goes back to someone who watched the Netflix series, like, it's funny watching Wilson Fisk be this helpless, and to think that him being mayor was the thing that was going to
mm,
make him this helpless, where you saw him and so
right,
many different scenarios in the Netflix series just power his way through. He can't do that now. He can't just
mm,
put his hands on people and start going crazy. And
mm,
so to see him helpless in the system and be like, why do we have to go through all of these different steps to get this one thing approved? Like, I'm trying to make a difference. I'm trying to, whether it's justified or not,
mm,
he is trying to at least act, and there's just so many things stopping him from acting, whether that's
right,
because of corporate interests, because of big money. They kind of hit on that a little bit later in other episodes about that,
right,
the game within the game. But you're seeing this two-sided coin of the system preventing both from trying to accomplish something good.
right.
And I found that really interesting.
Yeah, it was, and I didn't really think about that juxtaposition of those two things where Matt's running into a broken system on a very individual level, and Wilson Fisk is running into a broken system on a very high government level. And I think
Hmm.
that's a very interesting. Um, it's very interesting to pit those things against each other. I hadn't considered that before, so I'm glad that you saw it that way. Um, so,
Yeah, and then going into the next episode, we just get a nice old fashioned St. Patrick's Day bank heist, and where Matt continues the cycle of saving people in need, returning back to a bank that had just denied him a loan for his law firm, and using his senses, outwitting the bank robbers and saving the hostages, all while protecting the joy that the robbers were seeking. We get a pretty intense. We get a pretty interesting cameo in this episode as well. We can talk about that here shortly. That I know that you're happy about.
I am.
But I mean, when we could just, the XI Kamala's dad. Like that was
Yeah.
just I
Miss Marvel's
um
dad shows up.
yes.
Um, one of my favorite Disney Plus shows. I won't reveal where it falls on my list because we'll do that ranking here pretty soon. But I love that we get characters that we're familiar with show up in this
Yes.
show. And it happens more than just in this episode. But I will say this episode felt the most out of place so far.
Yeah.
Like
I agree with
tonally,
that.
it was way different. It felt much lighter, much it felt much more like the MCU we're used to than the other 5 episodes of Daredevil so far to
Well,
me.
besides the last 5 minutes where he goes into a pretty brutal fight that I have never seen in the MCU. But besides
Right,
that, I
right,
I
right.
agree. Yeah. Like the overall theme. I mean, I don't want to say it was a throwaway episode
Mm,
because I loved how they showed the the almost the dare I mean yes the Daredevil side. I mean he wasn't suited up for this, but
mm-hmm.
they showed how he uses his senses to really outwit and outsmart
Yep.
his the villains, because it's not he doesn't have super strength like he's
Mm,
like when we just listed off that Doomsday list. Those are people who are moving mountains and can stop an
right.
explosion. That's not there. Like you say, he's a street level superhero, so
Mm,
he's really having to use wit, use his ability to hear, to sense things that other people can't pick up on, to really just outsmart and out and over navigate the villains. So to just get a simple
mm,
episode like this, I
right.
enjoyed it. I'm surprised, given that there's only 8 episodes, that we would get an episode like this, that
Yeah.
if you took it out, it wouldn't change much of the story for really anyone. I feel like maybe if you saw like the
Yeah.
last 5 minutes, I think you might need to see that, but even that I don't think was necessary. I'm glad that they used the Funko Pop as an exposition for Kamala's dad, because Miss Marvel's dad, because I genuinely did not remember him at
Okay.
all. So
Yeah.
that was a good refresher for me.
Yeah.
But
I
but
mean,
yeah,
things that we like. Well, things that I like. Miss Marvel, Funko Pops, um, a good old fashioned bank heist.
I
Like
like 2 of the 3.
there was lots of things in this episode that were very appealing to me. Where I'm like, okay, great, we're getting some cameos, we're getting Matt using all of his senses like you just described. I think that's a great way of describing what happened. And one of the things that I think makes this episode worth our time to some degree is that we do get to see that, but it did feel out of place. It
Yeah,
might have been a waste of an episode. It's interesting that they packaged this episode with another
yeah,
episode right after it. They released two on the same night, and that may be some damage control of, hey, we know this episode's not the best, so we're going to give you a really good one to go along with it and keep the show moving along. Because you're right, this didn't move the story forward a whole lot. It was more of a little Daredevil one shot of, hey, this is also how Daredevil uses his powers. And now we're back to our main story. Oh yeah, the robbers kind of had something to do with Kingpin, but that's only if you're hyper paying attention to the show and remember a kind of obscure gang war that's going on
yeah.
off to the
That's
side.
right. Yep,
So it was just it
forgot
was
about that. So yep.
I enjoyed the hostage negotiator. I thought she was very funny and engaging with
Hmm.
the hostage negotiation because I think typically we are. It did turn some of those. flip some of those tropes. It did turn some of those classic negotiation tropes on their head, where
Hmm.
typically a negotiator comes in, they're like, "Man, you're not gonna steal from our bank. This is our bank." Blah 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 blah, and they go back and forth a little bit, and the negotiator wins. This negotiator like just failed at every turn until she
So,
told a weird joke.
I want to say, did you laugh at the joke?
Uh, I think I did,
I did
but
too.
not like
Okay, good.
not like a oh she told the joke and I instantly started laughing. It was more she told the joke. I went. I've never thought about any of that.
Yeah.
Just kind of more random, obscure type funny
I was like,
than
that
the
can't be the
actual
joke.
punchline
And
being
yep.
that funny. Right.
Yes.
I was like, how did you come up with that on the fly? But anyway, so I just thought it was an interesting episode. It
Yep.
felt like this was one of the things that they did not reshoot because this show went
Hmm.
through extensive reshoots. They initially had an 18 episode season planned out, and they were like 75% of the way through production. And they said, full stop, this is not what we want it to be. Let's go back to the
Scrap it.
beginning. It's 9 episodes. This feels like the episode that kind of snuck through so far. That's like, it's usable. So we're going to go with it because we need to tell the story for whatever reason, and we need to
Hmm.
have Kamala, Miss Marvel's dad, pop up in there.
And there's not a lot of action in this episode, but the action that is in this episode works. Like it's good.
Mm.
I mean, there was a pretty brutal fight scene at the very end,
Yeah,
and that felt true to just. I mean, not just compared to Netflix. It just felt good. It just felt complete.
right.
Like it did. There
Yeah.
was no weird cuts. It felt like it was shot really well. And so I agreed. I think this probably was one of the few episodes that they just kind of savaged and kept it
Mm.
going.
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't really serve. I don't know, and it is interesting because I do agree with you. I think they probably saw, like we can't let a week go by. We give this episode, it doesn't move the plot at all, and now we have
Right.
people asking people to wait another week to actually get the
Hmm.
plot moving forward. We could
Right.
lose some people, so
Yeah.
I think it was smart on them to go ahead and give us this next episode that we'll
Hmm.
get into, where we get more insight into our main villain Muse, probably the creepiest villain that we've seen in a while,
Hmm.
as he is going on a murder spree using his victim bloods to do graffiti paintings across the city. Both Fist and Matt are charged with their fate in the system and seeking justice for the victims, and both come to the same conclusion that the system is broken, and if you want to get something done, you got to do it yourself, or you can get a group of police officers with a long history of violence to do it for you. So we see both of them give into their dark impulses. Matt now back in the Daredevil suit after 6 episodes in a deadly fight with Muse and Fist, and just a random moment of rage, decided
Mm.
to brutally beat up his wife mistress Adam. Poor Adam. And
Poor Adam.
so, I mean, I don't even know where to start with this episode because
Yeah.
there was a lot in this. I mean, just I guess Muse reveal. I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was funny. Not, I thought it was funny how it was like the construction worker or
Hmm.
the guy who was trying to clean off the graffiti, and that whole
Right.
just like seeing Fist just constantly have to deal with people and like be in this environment that he's not used to, and it's like, why can't you just tell me what I need to know? And
Right.
I thought that was just comic, like a dark type of comedy, because it's
It
like, oh yeah,
was.
this is blood, by the way, like this
Right.
is human blood, that's why I can't clean it up.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I
See
thought that
that
was really
that felt like
interesting.
very classic MCU humor, where
Hmm.
the guy himself is being who he is. He's a sanitation worker. He's obviously got dad jokes and doesn't get to talk to a lot of people a whole lot. And he's taken this as his opportunity to tell a story.
Yeah.
And that's just who the character is. And you can tell that they chose a great actor to play this guy. And but really it does end up in a very dark place. But you got a
Yes.
little bit of levity right before they hit you with something dark, which if you listen to our last podcast episode, you know is important to me that you have some bright spots so that way when they bring the darkness, it actually means something and you're not just numb to it. So I very much enjoyed that because the previous episode, the one in the bank, it was light and airy, but in not in a kind of phase four, phase five MCU as opposed to phase one, two, and three MCU type of way. So
Hmm.
um, let me ask you: are you upset that we only just now got Matt in the suit in episode six, and kind of about like midway through episode six? It's not
Yeah.
like first minute of this show he's there.
No, because we've gotten fighting sequences with him,
Hmm.
and we've seen him constantly use. Because, I mean, the fights are fun. I do
Hmm.
enjoy them. Sometimes they're a little bit too much to me. I hate seeing people's, as someone who was in sports, I hate seeing legs snap. I hate seeing things like that. It grosses me out. I turn my head
Yep.
around every single time. So I love more. I mean, really, the bank episode was a perfect description of the things I loved about Daredevil's abilities and the
Right.
way that he uses them, the way that how smart he is, and how no one else realizes that until it's too
Right.
late. Like, I
Yep.
mean, the line of, like, what type of lawyer are you? Like, that's like constantly he's being asked that because
Right.
he's amazing, and
Right.
so I'm fine with it because I just don't think it's not like Spider-Man, it's not like Black Panther, it's not like these other
Yep.
superheroes where this suit makes the person, not that that's the case for
Right.
them, but you go to Spider-Man movies to see Spider-Man swing. You go, so for this
Yep.
it's like I'm fine with it being this long before we see him in the suit because we've gotten pieces of him in action, but we also got to see new elements of him that we normally don't
Right.
get to see. So yeah, so
Yeah.
doesn't really bother me too
Doesn't bother you?
much.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't bother me either. I know that it has bothered some people that it's taken this long to get him in the suit, but I think him being in the suit is a lot more meaningful because we've spent so much time building towards it and understanding how he's changed as a character since the last time he suited up. And I'm still not a fan of the Spider-Man nunchuck things that he's got going. I don't understand why. He has those or what purpose they serve. But how did you feel about the confrontation between Fisk and Adam, which was interesting to have that paired with Muse and Daredevil?
Yeah, I I think it just I think it is just meant to serve the parallel that just
Mm-hmm.
continues to go through this series of, both of them are just saying screw it, and Matt Murdock said it differently than that, and just like
Yep.
embracing that there is something that the Adam and Fist part I just found not out of place. It was just question because like I can like the Muse and Derek, like this has been the overall conflict, and maybe this is the conflict for Fist that we just maybe
Mm,
didn't pick up on. Like when we look at
right,
his anger with the system, really is the anger at the fact that his marriage is just failing, and this guy
right,
plays a role in it, and that's not as much of the focus that I pay attention to as much as I do the mayor stuff, and
right.
so I mean, it at the end of the day that sequence serves the parallel between him and Daredevil and
Mm-hmm.
how they're just constantly fighting this battle. If Fist throws an axe at me and tells me to come at him, I'm dropping that and I'm just getting back into bed. Like I'm not about to sit here and try to fight this man. So props to Adam for at least giving the fighters chance,
Yeah,
but it was interesting. It was just a
it
really
was.
interesting sequence and that the
I
Muse
think
and
it's
Daredevil
just
part was more so where I was
yeah,
kind of locked into.
right. Yeah, I was definitely more locked in to that fight. There was more stakes there. I think the Kingpin stuff is just really showing that that part of him still exists,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it is probably going to accentuate the fact that he is showing restraint 95% of the time.
Yeah.
And that he's not letting this version of himself out in public anymore. And I think it'll be interesting to see if it does show itself at the end of the season, or maybe in a season two. But overall, I thought that these four episodes were great. I thoroughly enjoyed them. I got to binge three of them last night, and that was kind of fun because everything has
Mm-hmm.
kind of been so weekly episodic lately that haven't gotten to just like power through and see the story build. I would have been disappointed if the only episode we got one week was episode five, the bank heist,
Yeah,
but I
same.
also don't fault them for having one episode that was lackluster, because there's been so many other Marvel shows and so many just shows in general where you have multiple episodes that are just throwaway and you don't know why they're there or what's happening. And this one was like, wasn't even that bad. It was just
No,
lesser than all the rest.
yeah,
Do you remember the episodes like when there was like 26 episode seasons of like The Office or Friends or whatever it was, where they would
yes,
just go back and essentially play a highlights reel from previous episodes, and like those episodes, I'm so glad that those are gone. And this
yes,
was not one of those
because I don't know
at
if this was
all.
the case for you, but it would take me like maybe 7 or 8 minutes before I realized
Hmm.
that that's what was happening, and then we just get
Right.
so angry that I wasted half an
Hmm.
episode just recapping things I already knew. And so yes,
Right.
I'm glad that day. And then I mean, yeah, then just those, throwaway episodes. Like a lot of the things I'm watching now, there is a overall plot. Like I think that day of
Hmm.
television, it's not a thing of the past, but it's just
Right.
not. There's more of an expectation that if you're going to, especially with these 10 and 9 episode series, like if you're only going to give me 9 or 10 episodes when I'm been used to like 25, each episode is going to have to be meaningful. Where back in
Yeah.
that 25, 26 days episode timeline, you could have 3 or 4 or 5 throwaway episodes and we wouldn't be
Right.
that upset about it. But we don't get that as well,
Mm-mm.
I say that we do with the Disney MCU
Right.
shows, which has been a big criticism of them, but we don't really get that in like prestige television, like
Right.
like the Severance and the Game of Thrones and the Breaking Bads of the world. It's like we're not getting that often.
Hmm.
So yeah, no, it was interesting, and I think it was a smart streaming, and I think they are being a little bit more strategic and just kind of breaking the rules with stuff like that,
Right.
because there really was no other reason to do this other than to make. I mean, they maybe a mid-season. They
Hmm.
just here's 2 episodes, but probably to keep people engaged. Because
Right.
I mean, it left on a pretty interesting note. Like I'm ready for episode 7, and
I'm
that's
ready for
the whole
episode
purpose
7.
of the previous episodes to
Yep.
make you look forward to the next one.
Yeah.
And
I'll be
so,
interested to see if they can wrap up Muse in just 3 episodes. Like, it feels
yeah,
like they might be able to because he doesn't seem to be super powered in any way that we can tell
no,
yet. He's just a really creepy dude doing terrible things. And so I'm wondering if they're going to wrap that up in 3 episodes or if he's going to carry on into season 2 and what's going to happen there.
and I'm like, is he even a focal point? I mean,
Right.
because I don't want to. People have been going on like a villain rant about this and Muse, and I don't care. I think it's not that I don't care. It's just like that isn't the point of the show for this one,
Mm,
which is interesting because usually that is like we've talked about villains and how much of a driving force they are with this show, but given that you do have Fist kind of in that role
mm-hmm.
in a way that we're not familiar with, where we can actually relate, like, well, he is being compared so close to the hero in a way that we've
Right.
never really seen before. I
Yeah.
think that if Muse is done after this episode and it goes back to them still just having to fight the system, and maybe there's a new part of that, whatever that looks like. Maybe it is Muse, maybe it's
Right.
them class. I mean, it does seem like there's about to be a clash because now you
Mm,
have this vigilante task force created by Fist, and then you have you know Murdoch putting back on the suit. So
mm-hmm.
that might be where this show starts to turn in these next 3 episodes. Whereas now
Right.
we've seen the parallels. Now it's time for them to intersect, time for them to clash and see what
Yeah.
that looks like when the
Right.
systems go against each other, the way that this show has been kind of showing that.
Right. All right. Well, I'm excited for episode 7. We probably won't dive back into this world until the season finale has
Hmm.
come out. And then at some point after that, we'll probably let you guys know where it ranks in a rank and explain with Marvel TV shows, let you know how Daredevil stacks up with the rest of the Disney Plus Marvel shows. But for right now, uh, we're going to ask our question. So far, is the show worth your time? And so, Travell, I'll let you go first and let us know if you think the show has been worth your time.
Yeah, it's definitely so. And just kind of throw it out there, like the total runtime as of right now is 4 hours and 49 minutes.
Mm,
So, and that's that's where 2/3 along the way there. So
yeah,
maybe another additional 2.5 hours looking
yeah,
around. So So I would say yes. I really enjoy this, and I do think that it is meeting my expectations. My only
Mm.
criticism, and I kind of already talked about this, is just that there is a lot of telling. I don't like the BB reports. If I'm being 100%
Oh,
honest, I just
okay.
think they're lazy. I don't really care for them. It goes back to just there's just a lot of telling. There's just not
Mm,
so much shown. Like if the city's in danger, let me see that. Let me not
mm,
see this, social media imitation of today's society of people
yeah,
just talking on camera. I mean, yeah, so I don't love that element of it. Um, but I mean, everything else is solid. Every
right.
like from Matt Murdock, his arch. I do miss Foggy. I do miss Karen. I do miss them, but this story has been a compelling one, and I'm excited to see how they finish. So yeah. What about you?
So yeah, it has been worth my time. I think that it has enough action and just kind of superhero stuff that I would be into it, but it's also adding this other layer of some of the thought-provoking things that we've talked about, even just this evening. And so I think getting through some of those things, getting both of those at the time makes it worth my time. And the 4 hours, 49 minutes has flown by. That is
Yeah.
surprisingly high to me. And maybe I know Marvel shows are typically, they're notorious for having 5 minute, 6 minute credits. So I don't know how much of that is being taken
Mm-hmm.
into account or not. But overall, I am thoroughly enjoying it. Can't wait for the next one. And we'll give our official ratings and everything next week. So, or not next week, next time we talk about Daredevil. So this week, we are going to have an outtake this week. We didn't have one last week. Just it was good to take a break from that. And now this week's outtake is going to be a challenge for each of us to think about and consider which movie, which big screen we have seen most in our life, like most number of views for a movie, and then most number of views for a TV show. And so we're just going to kind of see which movies and television shows have had the biggest impact on our life, just purely time wise. Maybe not emotionally. There's definitely some movies that I've only seen once and only need to see once and still resonate with me. But there's also things that I've seen a million times and should just be aware of what I've taken in the most. I will not count Cars. My son is really into the movie Cars. I've seen it more times than I ever thought possible, and I'm sure I'll see it more. But I'm not going to count that one. And we want to challenge you guys that in the comments on the video, on any of the social media posts, just let us know what your most watched big screens and most watched small screens are. So throw those down in the comments. Let us know what those are, and we look forward to kind of reviewing some of those with you guys on the next episode.
Cool. And we just want to keep encouraging you guys to, give us feedback, reach out to us, message us. We are constantly growing. We're constantly trying to figure this out, but we've really enjoyed the journey. I've enjoyed the conversation that Carson and I've had off camera about just how we can make this better for y'all, make this better for us, and just keep the conversation going. So until next time, consume wisely and stay thoughtful. Thank you for tuning in to the Intake Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe, rate, and share with your friends. You can watch all of our video podcasts on YouTube at youtube.com/theintake. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at The Intake Pod, and share your own intake experience with us via email at intakepod@gmail.com. This podcast is produced by us, Travelle McManus and Carson Miller.